Hello and welcome to the Whiskey Closet. My name is Kevin, and up next from the closet is Wilderness Trail Bottled in Bond. This is the High Rye product. This is Wilderness Trail Small Batch Bottled in Bond, which means that it's 50%, 100 proof, and this is the High Rye edition, not to be confused with the Wheated edition. I'm going to say a lot of nice things about Wilderness Trail in a minute, but I'm going to start with something not nice. This is the Wheated edition, yellow label, and this is the High Rye edition, the black label. The front of these bottles is identical. You cannot tell which one is which just from the label. And if you look at the side, you pretty much have to read the small print about the mash bill in order to figure out which is which. I think they should say wheat and rye, real big prominent fonts on the front of this thing. Okay, but tonight we're going to talk about the High Rye, which is my favorite. Okay, Wilderness Trail is a really neat distillery. Relatively new on the scene. They started in 2012. And they are neat, in my opinion, because of how transparent they are. If you go check out Wilderness Trail's website, there is so much information available. A couple of the things that they talk about on their website is that they have a proprietary infusion mashing process, which they believe means that they get exactly the right temperature when they're mashing the grain. Mashing is the process of turning the starch in the grains into sugar, so then the yeast can eat that sugar and turn it into alcohol. Wilderness Trail is also known for their sweet mashing process. So there's two kinds of sort of malting processes. There's sour mash, which I believe is more prevalent, and then sweet mash. And the main difference there is sour mash is kind of like a sourdough bread. You sort of have starter from your last batch that you add in. And the starter, just, chemistry happens. I'm no expert. You have less chance of other bacteria getting in and ruining your batch. So sweet mash requires a lot more maintenance and a lot more control, but as a consequence, you have more control. And a lot of people think more consistency as a result. Wilderness Trail is also really cool about sort of some of their age targets and stuff. They say that their age target is between 6 and 8 years, and everything will be for sure 4 years or more. I like the transparency there, where they're not necessarily promising a specific thing, but they're telling you what their goal is, which is pretty cool. This is the High Rye. It's a mash bill of 24% rye and 12% barley, and the rest, of course, is corn. Let's dive in and see. Ooh, it is a beautiful honey kind of thing. Honey is just the first thing that's really jumping out to me. There's a subtle baking spice, but it's pretty subtle right now. A hint of an herbal character from the rye. A little bit. I gotta really go for the back of the nostrils, and I start to get some of a sweet char from the oak. It smells excellent. It smells like super classic. Nothing overly alcohol, nothing overly leaping out, nothing funky, just like very classic. Let's give it a taste. Well, this is wild. First taste, and I'm getting bubblegum. Kind of getting bubblegum on the nose now, too. That's a note I've never gotten before. I'm going to continue with the tasting in a second, but I'm going to pause right now to beg and plead with you to please click the thumbs up and subscribe and leave comments. This is just a thing that I'm doing for fun, standing in a closet in my basement. I'm into bourbon. It's fun to share the experience with other people, and I'm just trying to grow the channel and do more of that. So when you do all those things that YouTube appreciates, it helps me grow the channel. Doesn't cost you anything to do it either. So thanks very much if you do. Back to tasting. The nose is really nice. I'm still getting that little bit of bubblegum. The bubblegum impact has backed off the palate for me a little bit. I'm getting more of a rye spice now. The front is where that bubblegum was. There's just kind of a very unique sweetness, which is where I was getting bubblegum from. So you get that sweetness at right away on the tongue, which transitions into just a nice, subtle spice. Nothing overwhelming. It's just like really relaxed and very tasty. It is also like very mouth-watering. So the oak impact is like really nicely balanced. I'm really surprised how unique the palate is. I was talking about how the nose seems so classic. The palate is very different. I definitely didn't remember it this way. It's been a long time since I tried it. I believe this is already the 10th edition of the Up Next series. So by now you may know that we're gonna taste the Wilderness Trail against last week's episode, which was tasting Chattanooga 111. That Chattanooga 111 nose is just so cool. It's coming across tonight after having just had the Wilderness Trail as being more in a toasted kind of space. As always, I can't say this enough on the channel, tasting things side by side is so fascinating because you will pick up different notes. And not even notes, who cares? Just the contrast will reveal a lot of interesting things that tasting it on its own may not reveal. So things present differently depending on what you just tasted and what you just ate and all those types of things. I must have bubblegum on my brain because now I'm getting bubblegum out of the Chattanooga. Lovely. It's so complex. It's so rich. It's also quite sweet. There is something that you would think of as being kind of a youthy impact, but there's so much else on the nose that it just doesn't even come across as youthy at the end of the day. Oh, so much more spice. The proof, that 11-point proof difference from 100 to 111 makes a big difference here. It tastes like there's a lot more oak in the Chattanooga too. And the finish on the Chattanooga is so long. So wow, between these, the Chattanooga is by far the more, interesting and complex. Hopping back to the Wilderness Trail. Oh, the honey is jumping back out now from the nose. And those classic rye spice notes. That is a great bourbon. For something just drinkable, solid, really, really good. It's not turning my head. It's not something where I'm gonna pour it for people because I'm like, oh, you have to taste this. This is more like I could see this as being more of like a staple. When you just want something easy to sip, that you can sip neat, that's gonna be good, but isn't gonna require a lot of attention. That's pretty good. And the Chattanooga is just so different. Okay, the really interesting thing here is around, what is it? The Wilderness Trail feels like it's just perfectly melded. The Chattanooga feels like it's sort of two separate things, or like the layers aren't as well mixed or something. You get a sweetness that is very young kind of sweetness, and then you get a lot of like an oak impact, kind of aggressive, but they don't overlap well. They're sort of like on top of each other. Whereas in the Wilderness Trail, it's such a unified sip. It's just very, very balanced and nice. The more time I'm spending with it too, the more rye impact I'm getting from the Wilderness Trail. And in a herbal rye way, as opposed to like a nice spice way. So that's not necessarily a negative, and I think for a lot of people that's a big positive. For me, that can be kind of on the line. I always like to try to pick a favorite when I do this. It is really, I'm having a very hard time picking a favorite here. There's so much that happens in the sip with the Chattanooga. And the Wilderness Trail is just, I don't know, more balanced, more professional. Something like that. When I first sipped these, I thought for sure I would end up thinking that the Chattanooga was my favorite, but the more time that I'm spending with them, I think I'm gonna give it to the Wilderness Trail. Well, this has been another episode of The Whiskey Closet. Come back next week for a tasting of Whiskey War Barrel Proof. This is gonna be a fun one. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.